Hey everyone, and welcome to the GRC Room for 5 questions. I'm Mike Andrews here once again with Karina Klever, and we're happy to welcome StackAware founder Walter Haydock. Walter helps AI-powered companies manage cyber, compliance, and privacy risks so they can innovate responsibly. How are you doing today, Walter?
Great. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks so much for joining us. Karina, if you want to, I'll hand it off to you for a brief introduction and the first question.
I am Karina Klever, founder of Klever Compliance. We're known for compliance management as a service, and our latest thing is we're alleviating tool lard everywhere. And so welcome, Walter. We're so happy to have you. First question of today is, which part of cyber GRC do you think that most businesses struggle with the most?
The item that most businesses struggle with the most, in my opinion, is asset inventory. Tons of companies have tools, data that they are not tracking, that they do not know how it's being processed, where it's being stored, and this creates an enormous headache, especially when you factor in the development of generative AI features and tools and all these vendors. You're going to see a proliferation of data throughout the internet without an ability to track it, and that can allow it to get leaked or embedded into other people's large language models, which can threaten your trade secrets or your compliance obligations.
I am so with you on that one. One of my biggest sore spots, I had a client very recently who had an API sending data to a vendor that they had terminated the relationship with over 3 years ago, and it was still sending data. Nobody checked it. Nobody did the maintenance on it. So totally with you on that one.
What's funny is this is so relevant to AI, which is the main topic Walter talks about, but it probably sounds familiar from traditional GRC. That's a problem before. One of the first things we do with every client is say, well, let's do data classification, hardware list, software list. And if the hardware and software list is kind of a mess and they don't really know what they have, there's probably gonna be problems because you can't really protect and be compliant with stuff you don't even know you have, right? Cool, no, I definitely agree on that one. For the second question, Walter, what's one data breach that stands out to you the most and why that one?
A data breach that stood out to me was the reporting last fall in 2024, where apparently the Chinese government hacked into looks like 9 different telecommunications companies and were eavesdropping on the communications of the current president and vice president. And they entered those networks, at least in part, using a mechanism called CALEA, Communications Assistance to Law Enforcement Act, which is designed to allow the government to eavesdrop on people, terrorists, criminals, things like that. So the Chinese government basically used our own backdoors to backdoor us.
Not a lot of people know about that one, Mike.
I heard about that briefly. But that's such a big part of having a backdoor in general, because you either don't have backdoors or you do, and if you do, you might not be able to protect them as well as you think. Karina, what do you think about that?
I think that as an industry, we all need to step up our basic GRC principles and stop leaking so much data everywhere, and really hold ourselves a little bit more accountable for the data that we're storing. Because I used this analogy the other day. We're hoarding so much data. It's kind of like you got to save the onesie from when you were a 3-month-old baby. You got to keep it in the closet in case you might use it again. Really, people? Right? So purging and destruction practices need to be relevant so that we only have purposefulness and minimization in mind for the data that we're using. Walter, what is the most impactful GRC-related advice that you ever received?
The most impactful advice I ever received was actually from my time in the Marine Corps, which was to inspect what you expect. And applied to the context of GRC and cybersecurity, if you've got a policy, procedure, something like that, which you have levied on the workforce, if you're not monitoring compliance with it, then almost why bother? It's basically just a checkbox at that point. So making sure that you have optimally automated ways to track how effectively you are meeting your own security requirements is really key.
I really like that one. I've heard some other quotes that are kind of like that, but inspect what you expect. That's a really big one. I've also got 22 years of service in the Air Force and various components. So I'm gonna have to find a way to work that in at an upcoming drill weekend at some point. Thanks
There
for
you
your
go.
service, by the way. That's awesome. Marines is,
Thank you.
I don't know if I cut it where you've been, but that's awesome.
Smarter than me.
Well, thank you to both of you. And I think the only thing that I can contribute is, I think that taking the guidance of the regulations and frameworks and making it appropriate to your actual true operations is incredibly important, instead of treating GRC like it is checkbox compliance, which it really, really isn't.
Oh, Karina, you were Special Forces, right? No,
In my own special way.
just kidding. Moving on to the fourth one. Walter, what do you do differently that allows you to excel in this field?
Something that StackAware brings to our clients, which sets us apart, is the actionable nature of the recommendations that we make. So it's pretty easy to see a problem and say, well, maybe you should patch more frequently, or you should apply these configuration changes. But StackAware gets way down into the details, and we say, this is the precise setting that you should set. Here's the documentation to go to that shows you exactly how you do it. Here's the precise risk that we're talking about here. Here's how you can avoid it. And if you can't avoid it, here's how you can potentially transfer it through indemnification or cyber insurance. So we take a very detail-oriented approach when we're providing advice to our clients.
All right, fantastic. So last question then, what is the top thing that a business can do today to strengthen its cyber GRC?
The number one thing that businesses can do right now to strengthen their GRC program is to develop an effective and actionable data classification program. I see companies that way overcomplicate this by having way too many levels of data classification, and also ones that are not tied to the handling requirements of the data. So most companies should probably just have public and confidential. If you are in a heavily regulated space like healthcare, it might make sense to tag protected health information, because you need to have a business associate agreement if you're providing that to a third party, or if you're focused on GDPR applicability and compliance, then maybe tagging personal data might also make sense, whether or not it's public or confidential, because that law does have some requirements for how you handle personal data, irrespective of whether it's public or not.
Well, data classification needs to govern access controls, right? Who has what level of access to the most privileged information, protections. I'm seeing people encrypt publicly available data. Why? Right? Get rid of it in 2 weeks. Don't even hold on to it, right? Backups, incident and recovery practices, of course, very important for when you're down. How do you know which data to restore first? Your recoveries, your change management. So for your more important data, most directly tied to the business that you would know because of a BIA, of course, you can put in more stringent controls for your CAB approvals and your entire change process, opposed to the least stringent ones for less significant data types. The one thing that I see people miss in data classification is they do not list the data types that they actually have and do not align them directly into that data classification. They say they have data classification and they say this is a loose pointer to it, but they don't specify how to handle it, which other competency areas are dependent on those classifications, and why is that important as far as mapping, as far as vendors. Your data classification directly correlates to your vendor management as well, because your vendor who handles most important data is not going to be as stringently controlled under the most stringent life cycle as that vendor who has virtually no important data. I am with you. Data classification is first and foremost, and it's kind of a lost art. So I'm very, very happy to hear you say that.
Both your first and your last response were very practical and also super relevant to AI. And it just shows that even if you are all in on AI or you're not, you don't need to manage this stuff in silos, right? You don't need to recreate the wheel for AI or manage it completely separately. You can manage it along with your other GRC in a lot of cases, and then just tailor things to account for the AI usage. Really good answer, Walter. I want to tell the audience that Walter on his website offers free AI governance templates right now. We know for a fact this is a really important topic right now because I see this at companies. So if you're thinking about spinning up AI governance at your company, definitely stop by the website and have a look at those templates. And Walter, if you could tell the audience where else they could find you other than LinkedIn. And also, if with that, I think it was a month or two ago, you had this pretty wild offer that for certain types of companies, you were willing to jump on a plane and go help them out. So if you remember what I'm talking about, if you could tell us that as well as to close us out.
I'll definitely reiterate that offer, which is there are some qualifications. You do need to be a CXO, chief something in healthcare or life sciences. But if you meet those criteria, then I will personally fly to your office or your home office to do an in-person AI risk and ISO 42001 gap assessment. And to claim that offer, please go to cxo.stackaware.com. That's cxo.stackaware.com.
Wow. I've seen a lot of offers on LinkedIn. I don't know. That's probably the best one I've seen because a lot of companies, and myself included, we do a lot over like Zoom these days. So that just shows your commitment. Thanks for that. Thanks for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure, and hope you have a great day.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Karina.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.